The story begins in a dark forest. Coinzel was once counted among the legendary heroes who defended the Empire against an invasion by the Lord of Shadows. But after achieving this monumental feat, he was betrayed by his fellow heroes, who killed him to claim the glory for themselves. Now, years after this treachery, Coinzel has returned to life, driven by a thirst for revenge. The world now reveres the 7 who betrayed him as legendary heroes, and their nation has risen to great fame because of it. This fame is so immense that a young elf girl, along with countless others, is willing to go to any lengths to smuggle herself into their land and cross the border. However, that doesn't go so well for these people because they got caught attempting to sneak their way in. As per the rules, they are going to be executed. The chief warrior monk, Rasheb, always holds public executions whenever someone is caught trying to sneak in, mostly because it deters others from trying to cross the border illegally, but also because it's a lot of fun for him. With a huge smile on his face, he signals for the criminals to be hoisted up. As they scream and beg for mercy, they are repeatedly stabbed through the guts until they are no longer breathing. Rasheb then reminds all the spectators that they can legally cross the border if they obtain a travel pass from him. Although applications do require some incentives to be approved, with the execution now complete, Rasheb heads backstage to rest. However, upon arriving, he discovers one of his men holding the little girl from earlier. A soldier explains to Rasheb that the girl was caught trying to hide inside one of the merchant's crates. The girl attempts to excuse her actions, claiming it was all an accident, but Rasheb isn't convinced. He's about to order another round of executions when Coinzel appears, chastising Peepee for wandering off on her own. The soldiers, caught off guard, momentarily release Peepee, but before Coinzel can leave with her, he's stopped and questioned about his identity. Claiming to be Peepee's brother, Coinzel faces immediate skepticism from Rasheb, who points out they look nothing alike. Regardless of whether they're truly siblings, Rasheb decides it's irrelevant, as both will face execution in the next round. Coinzel realizes that he's not going to be able to talk his way out of this one, so he's about to draw his sword. But just before he does, a man sneaks up behind him and Peepee and yanks them into the air. He scolds the two and acts as if he knows them before apologizing to Rasheb for all the trouble they caused. Rasheb normally wouldn't let this slide, but Wide gives him some gold coins to let them go, so Rasheb decides to ignore the rules just this once. One of the soldiers can't believe Rasheb would really let stowaways go, but Rasheb has full authority here, so he doesn't have to listen to his subordinate. After Rasheb and the soldiers leave, Peepee expresses her gratitude to Wide for saving her, only to get a smack on the head from Coinzel. Coinzel had no intention of getting involved with Peepee, but was hiding in the ox cart behind her. When she was caught, it exposed his hiding place as well. Wide turns to Coinzel and Peepee, criticizing their sloppy plan of sneaking across the border by hiding in cargo. He points out that such careless attempts will only lead to failure. Wide explains that he's already paid a smuggler to ensure his safe passage and doesn't want Coinzel and Peepee jeopardizing his plans or alerting the monastery to their presence. While Wide is indifferent to their fate, whether they're caught or executed, he warns them to ensure their actions don't interfere with his escape. If they value their lives, he advises them to abandon their attempt and reconsider crossing the border. Before Wide can leave, Coinzel calls out to him and asks to know more about this smuggler he talked about. The man says he has no reason to tell a couple of kids about his contact, and in the first place, he doesn't understand why kids like them are willing to risk their lives just to get to the other side of the border. Peepee tells him that her home was destroyed, so there's nothing left for her here anymore, and she wants to get across for a better life. Just then, Coinzel's ears pick up the sound of a lot of footsteps, and he can tell that there are 13 armed men approaching. He casually picks Peepee up, walks over to the canal, and throws her in. This way, he won't have to worry about protecting her if a fight breaks out. On that note, they are immediately surrounded by 13 soldiers from the monastery. They know Rasheb released them because they showed good virtue to him, but the rest of the soldiers didn't get anything, so they still came after them. Coinzel doesn't understand what these guys are talking about when they say virtue, so he asks Wide about it. Wide explains that the monastery controls all the traffic going in and out of the border, so they are meant to judge whether someone is fit to cross over based on how virtuous they are. But in reality, travel is only approved for those who can bribe their way in. These soldiers saw how much Wide gave Rasheb, so they know he must have more money on him, and they plan to take every last penny after killing them. A soldier charges at Coinzel, but before the attack can land, Coinzel swiftly draws his sword and slices the soldier's body clean in half. Wide is left stunned by Coinzel's incredible strength, marveling at how effortlessly he accomplished such a feat, while the other soldiers are frozen in fear. Despite their terror, the lure of money drives them to charge at Coinzel together. Unfortunately for them, they were hopelessly outmatched. By the end of the confrontation, 13 lifeless bodies were discarded into the canal. After they've disposed of all the evidence, Wide says he has a favor to ask of Coinzel, and in exchange, he will tell Coinzel about the smuggler he mentioned. A little while later, Pepe finally makes it out of the water, but even though she's upset about getting thrown in like that, she doesn't have any time to complain because Coinzel says they are going to meet the smuggler. Wide leads the group into a tavern underneath the city. While Coinzel and Pepe are sitting at a table, Wide has a little chat with the smuggler and tavern owner, Altia. He apologizes and explains that he'll need her to give him a discount on the smuggling fee, as he had to use some of the money to bribe Rasheb in order to save the kids. Although Altia isn't thrilled about the request, she agrees, given that it was for the children's sake. She's particularly fond of them, especially Coinzel, and expresses an interest in getting to know him better. Later, Wide comes downstairs to inform Coinzel that Altia wants to see him in her room. Before Coinzel heads up, Wide asks him to be mindful and avoid spoiling Altia's mood. Altia offers to help Coinzel in exchange for him working for her, but Coinzel refuses and says he doesn't need her help since he's sure he can cross the border by himself. She asks him if he's sure he wants to reject her offer, since if he misses the ship today, he will miss his chance to meet the 7 great heroes. This gets Coinzel's attention, so he asks her what she means by that. Altia explains that the 7 great heroes are going to be stationed near the border in order to suppress the civil war. If Coinzel manages to get across, he's pretty much guaranteed to run into them. Meanwhile, Rasheb has assembled his soldiers outside the tavern, seething with anger at the so-called evil people inside who failed to donate to his monastery. He declares his intention to hunt them down and eliminate them. Suddenly, one of Altia's men bursts into her room to warn her that Rasheb and his forces have arrived. Outside, Rasheb confronts the crowd gathered at the tavern's entrance, announcing that he has received reports linking the establishment to an illegal smuggling operation. Claiming he's there to investigate, he demands to speak with the owner. In response, Altia steps forward from the back. She attempts to bluff her way out by insisting she knows nothing about such activities, but Rasheb reveals he has evidence to suggest otherwise. He brings out a little man, and that man immediately snitches, saying he came here earlier to ask for Altia's help smuggling himself across the border. Now, Altia can't bluff her way out of this one, so Rasheb is quite pleased with the man's snitching. But snitches get stitches, so Rasheb kills the guy anyway. Since they now have confirmation that this place is a smuggling operation, Rasheb orders his men to kill everyone present. A massive fight breaks out, and in the process, Rasheb manages to grab a hold of Pepe. He recognizes her as the girl from this morning, and even though he spared her that time, he's going to have to kill her to set an example here. Wide realizes he can't reach Pepe in time to save her, but just as Rasheb is about to strike, Coinzel suddenly drops down from the ceiling, crushing several of Rasheb's men and startling him enough to release Pepe. Rasheb is shocked that Coinzel would dare to kill soldiers of the monastery, as defying them is equivalent to challenging one of the 7 heroes, Landgrave. But that's precisely what Coinzel intends to do. When one of the soldiers charges at him, Coinzel effortlessly cuts him down, displaying his overwhelming strength. Altia watches in astonishment, realizing Coinzel is far more powerful than she had assumed. Once the fight is over, Coinzel calmly walks over to check on the others and asks if Pepe is alright. Thankfully, she's only unconscious and will recover after some rest. Since she's alright, Coinzel doesn't really see a reason to keep killing, so he decides to let Rasheb run away. Once he gets out of there, Rasheb is infuriated by the fact that all of his soldiers were annihilated by a single boy. If the monastery hears about this, then his position as chief might be revoked. He decides to take drastic measures so he can regain his honor, which is why as soon as some other monastery soldiers arrive, he declares martial law. Since the tavern was busted, everyone goes into hiding in the tunnels under the city, but Coinzel still intends to smuggle himself across the border tonight. Altia tries to dissuade Coinzel, pointing out that after everything that's happened, security will be tighter than ever. However, Coinzel insists he cannot afford to miss this ship if he plans to confront the 7 heroes. Besides, he's confident he can handle anything the monks throw at him, especially with the moon out tonight. Seeing how determined he is, Altia decides to help by revealing a secret route, one that even the monastery is unaware of. Meanwhile, at the monastery, Rasheb is taking the hunt very seriously and has called for backup from Reincarnates. When Reincarnates arrives, Rasheb explains that he needs his help. Reincarnates is willing to assist, but asks if Rasheb is certain, reminding him that his services come at a steep price. However, after the humiliation Rasheb has suffered, he's prepared to pay any amount to ensure those children are killed. Meanwhile, Coinzel and the others are running through some tunnels, but Coinzel is having a hard time because he hates places where he can't see the moon. And this place smells awful. Altia explains that this place is isolated from the rest of the underground fortress and was previously used by mages to perform experiments, which is why these gremlin things exist. But they aren't very strong, so Altia is easily able to slice them in half. They eventually arrive at an opening, so Altia explains that the corridor up front leads to the port's underground storage warehouse. However, as they try to get to the warehouse, their path is blocked by a giant gremlin. Altia is scared out of her mind because this is the same thing that killed her friend 3 years ago. Coinzel immediately leaps into action, aiming to strike the creature down, giving Altia a glimmer of hope that he might actually defeat it. However, his sword barely makes a dent, and the creature grabs him, slamming him into a wall with overwhelming force. Altia collapses in despair, realizing that if even Coinzel couldn't defeat the beast, there's no way any of them stand a chance of surviving. To make matters worse, the ship they were planning to sneak onto has already arrived, but due to the martial law Rasheb has enforced, it will only remain in port for a short time, making it impossible for them to reach it in time. While Altia resigns herself to defeat, Wide refuses to give up. With unfinished business driving him forward, he resolves to keep fighting as long as he still has breath in his body. He uses one of his rings to wrap around the gremlin's leg and pulls on it to knock him over. The gremlin gets back up and tries to punch him, but Wide dodges and manages to use one of his rings to strike the gremlin's head. It looks like Coinzel's earlier attack managed to weaken it because a crack appears on the gremlin's forehead, so Wide thinks he might actually have a chance of defeating it. Unfortunately, immediately after he says that, he gets grabbed and knocked into a wall, so he won't be able to fight anymore. Now nothing can stop the gremlin from killing them all. But just when all hope is lost, a bright light begins to shine from the spot where Coinzel got knocked out. Moments later, Coinzel is back on his feet. He thanks the gremlin for its earlier punch, explaining that it opened a hole in the ceiling, allowing him to see the moon again, which has completely restored his strength. Now at full power, Coinzel is ready to fight. The gremlin attempts to crush him, but Coinzel is too fast, leaping out of the way and slicing into its head. The gremlin scoffs, declaring that such a weak attack won't be enough to defeat it. However, in the very next moment, its entire body splits cleanly in half. With the gremlin dealt with, Coinzel turns to Wide and tells him to stop wasting time and get back on his feet. They need to move quickly if they want to catch the airship. Just as they're about to leave, Coinzel senses an attack approaching. He quickly warns the others, and moments later, a massive blast obliterates the gremlin's body entirely. The source of the attack is revealed to be Reincarnates, wielding his powerful magic sword. Confident in Reincarnates' abilities, Rasheb is certain that he can finally put an end to Coinzel once and for all. Coinzel and Peepee hear a dreadful noise emanating from Reincarnates' magic sword, causing them to recoil in disgust. Rasheb assumes their reaction stems from fear and begins explaining how Reincarnates was once a smuggler like them. However, after recognizing the overwhelming power of the monastery, Reincarnates abandoned his old ways and now collaborates with Rasheb to punish defiant stowaways like them. Altia is appalled that Reincarnates would betray his former comrades in this way and angrily calls him a shameless bastard, but her insults elicit no response from Reincarnates. Rasheb interrupts her, declaring that the true shame lies with the vile stowaways who refuse to pay the monastery, since they lack the money to offer. Rasheb orders Reincarnates to kill them all. Following Rasheb's command, Reincarnates prepares his sword and unleashes a devastating slash at the group. Coinzel quickly urges everyone to get behind him as he charges forward to intercept the attack. When the dust clears, Coinzel is still standing and implores Reincarnates to stop wielding that sword. The magic sword's power comes from the cries and suffering of the fairy bound to its hilt, but only Coinzel and Peepee are able to hear it in this place. They are the only ones who truly grasp the torment the fairy endures every time the sword is swung. Despite Rasheb's insistence that Reincarnates strike again and finish off the pitiful stowaways, Reincarnates instead sheathes his sword and begins walking away, unwilling to continue the fight. Reincarnates had been hired to prevent the stowaways from boarding the transport ship, and with the delay he caused, they no longer have the chance to do so. His task is complete. Additionally, he feels a bit uneasy about this Coinzel kid, as Coinzel not only managed to see the slash from his sword, something he shouldn't have been able to perceive, but also deflected it with surprising ease. Rasheb, desperate, begs Reincarnates to keep attacking until the kids are eliminated. Reincarnates doesn't mind continuing the fight, but he warns Rasheb it will cost him extra. Reluctantly, Rasheb agrees to pay the additional fee. Reincarnates unsheathes his sword again and launches another powerful slash at the group. Once more, Coinzel steps forward to intercept the attack, but this time, the ground beneath him crumbles, causing Coinzel to lose his footing and fall. Rasheb finds it unfortunate that Coinzel happened to fall before they could finish him off, but it doesn't bother him too much since he can always track Coinzel down later. He thanks Reincarnates for his assistance up to this point, but decides to handle Coinzel himself from now on, as he doesn't want to keep paying Reincarnates. Meanwhile, although Coinzel has fallen to one of the lower floors, the others manage to stay safe by taking shelter under a rock. Once Rasheb and Reincarnates leave, they come out of hiding. Thankfully, none of them are injured, and Wide insists that if they move quickly, they can still reach the ship before it departs. He has no choice, as he must save someone from Landgrave's military. Peepee, however, is concerned about Coinzel. Knowing that Rasheb hasn't given up on pursuing him, Wide reassures her not to worry, confident that if his suspicion about Coinzel's true identity is correct, Coinzel will be just fine. Coinzel wakes up on one of the lower monastery floors, and he recognizes the area, but before he can find a way out, he gets cornered by Rasheb. Rasheb is surprised that Coinzel managed to survive that fall, but it doesn't matter since he's going to kill Coinzel anyway. Earlier, he saw that Coinzel gained strength from being exposed to the moon, but this is the deepest part of the monastery, so no moonlight will ever reach here. Additionally, this place is guarded by Rasheb's strongest subordinates, the Holy Guardian Brotherhood, so Coinzel is completely surrounded. Normally, Rasheb would never do something as cowardly as pull out his big guns against a weakened child, but Coinzel made him look like a fool, which wasn't exactly hard to do. Rasheb is holding a grudge over it and isn't letting it go until Coinzel is dead. Rasheb orders the Guardians to cut Coinzel to pieces. One of them charges forward, but Coinzel leaps into the air and parries the attack simultaneously. This is far beyond what any normal child should be able to do, prompting the Guardians to question Rasheb about Coinzel's true nature. They make it clear they have no intention of risking their lives against someone clearly out of their league. Rasheb dismisses their concerns, claiming he only brought Coinzel here to serve as a source of entertainment for them. He mocks his supposedly mighty warriors for being scared of a mere child. Offended by the insinuation that they are cowards, the soldiers regroup and attempt to corner Coinzel, aiming to stab him from all sides and leave no room for escape. However, Coinzel evades their coordinated attack with ease, a feat that, in the middle of battle, proves he is not someone to be trifled with. Coinzel could easily defeat them, but since he is currently weakened, that would take too long, so instead, Coinzel goes for a quicker option and starts running in Rasheb's direction. Rasheb starts running away while squealing for the Guardians to save him, but then he trips over the stairs and falls on his face. He turns over, but before he can get back on his feet, he sees Coinzel standing over him with his sword drawn. The guardians try to get Coinzel away from Rasheb, but Coinzel simply plunges his sword into the ground and activates a trap that instantly kills all the guards. Rasheb can't believe what he just witnessed and asks how it's possible that Coinzel knew of that trap when even he, a monastery chief, was unaware of its existence. Coinzel explains that he passed through this area long ago and was forced to memorize the location of everything in the monastery, which is also how he knows what's happening behind those doors. Without hesitation, he throws Rasheb through the doors, causing a commotion that draws the attention of the priest inside. The priest, annoyed by the disturbance, remarks that this is the most sacred area of the monastery, reserved for only a select few. He emphasizes that it is so important that even the 7 heroes are not permitted to set foot here without explicit authorization. However, Coinzel pays no heed to his words. Ignoring the priest entirely, he walks past him and approaches the mass of roots at the center of the room. The priest assumes Coinzel is interested in knowing the story of this place, so he tells him that this is the altar of the attendant of the 7 heroes, Ergnak. As the story goes, when Ergnak passed through this place with the 7 heroes, he drew the magic circle that created the legendary stone spear wall around the empire. Coinzel tells the priest to shut up because he can't bear to listen to such a disrespectful story any longer. For Ergnak, the man who sacrificed himself for the sake of the empire to only be remembered as a mere attendant is the worst joke Coinzel has heard since he revived. The priest turns to Rasheb and asks who this boy is. Rasheb dismissively replies that Coinzel is just a random stowaway hoping to catch a glimpse of the 7 heroes on the other side of the wall. Hearing this, the priest admits he can understand why Rasheb let Coinzel get this far. However, realizing neither of them can stop Coinzel at the moment, the priest decides to share a story. He explains that 23 years ago, as the heroes traveled through the forest of death, 4 treacherous lancers attempted to betray the kingdom. The 7 heroes, standing valiantly, confronted the traitors, took their lives, and pressed on with their mission to defeat the enemy forces. Yet, unwilling to leave the empire defenseless, they risked everything to construct the Great Wall that now encircles the kingdom. That, the priest says, is how history recounts the events of that fateful day. But Coinzel remembers it happening much differently. During Coinzel's past life as Asherit, he and the other heroes were on their way to the battlefield. But Ergnak had some concerns about the safety of the empire. The other heroes told him that he didn't need to concern himself with such a petty matter, since even if a couple thousand people of the empire died, all that mattered was that they complete the mission assigned to them by the empire and return as heroes. Since the others weren't going to listen to him, Ergnak decided that he would take defensive measures on his own, and Asherit volunteered to go with him to make sure he was able to return safely. Before he left, one of the heroes tried to stop Asherit, but Asherit assured him that everything would be fine because, after all, they promised each other that they would all complete their mission together and return as heroes. The head priest, however, did not witness any of these events firsthand. What he did see was the aftermath, when Ergnak had sacrificed himself to create the spiked wall. The sight moved him so deeply that he resolved to build a monastery to safeguard this sacred ground. As if in recognition of his dedication, the hero Landgrave himself later granted him the honor of presiding over the empire's borders. Coinzel finds the story told by those 7 traitors to cover their tracks so bold and outrageous that it's almost laughable in an ironic sense. He recalls how delighted Landgrave had been when the emperor entrusted a former bandit like him with such a critical mission. Landgrave would eagerly boast to anyone who would listen about his newfound hero status. Even as he killed Coinzel, he was likely laughing his head off, already imagining all the things he could do once he tricked the world into believing he had achieved something noble. As Landgrave and the other false heroes killed Coinzel, they all had such huge smiles on their faces because they knew they could get away with it. The fact that those 7 got rewarded for their deception makes Coinzel absolutely sick. Coinzel knows Ergnak willingly sacrificed himself to make this wall to protect the kingdom, but he needs to get through so he can get his revenge. He draws his sword, and the head priest realizes that Coinzel must be trying to destroy the wall, so he orders Rasheb to stop him. But Rasheb already knows that he stands no chance against Coinzel, so he doesn't want to get anywhere near him. The priest tries to take matters into his own hands and launches 2 spikes at Coinzel, but Coinzel easily deflects them and then slashes through the magic circle Ergnak used to create the spike wall. wall. Meanwhile, on the surface, the others arrive at the loading bay, only to find that they are too late. The ship has already departed from the port. To make matters worse, they quickly find themselves surrounded by soldiers, and it seems like their journey has reached its end. But suddenly, the walls surrounding the Empire start to collapse, along with the entire monastery. With both the walls and the monastery reduced to rubble, panic spreads among the guards. They realize that, after all they've done, they're doomed if the people manage to get their hands on them. Terrified, the guards flee in every direction as thousands of people flood into the area that once stood as the monastery. Meanwhile, Coinzel emerges from the ruins of the monastery, his thoughts drifting back to the last time he saw Ergnak alive. He had followed Ergnak to ensure his safe return, but when the magic circle was finally complete, Ergnak told him that this was their farewell. The magic circle he was about to activate would protect the kingdom, but it would also imprison him there for the rest of his life. He urged Coinzel to return without him and fulfill the mission in his stead. Coinzel knows that Ergnak wouldn't approve of what he just did, and he quietly apologizes for it. But no matter the cost, he is determined to kill the 7 traitors. Amid all the chaos, Rasheb somehow manages to survive. By a stroke of luck, Reincarnates happens to be nearby, and Rasheb desperately pleads for his help. However, an enraged mob is closing in, seeking vengeance against Rasheb, and Reincarnates has no interest in getting involved. Without a word, he turns away, pretending he hasn't seen anything. Meanwhile, Wide and the others use the chaos to their advantage. Under the cover of the confusion, they take out a few guards as they attempt to board a ship. Instead of simply boarding, the group seizes the ship and sets course for the Empire. Although Pipi is finally on her way to the Empire, she remains deeply upset, uncertain if Coinzel has managed to escape from the chaos. But just then, she spots Coinzel flying alongside their ship on a dragon he had stolen, and a wave of relief washes over her as she realizes he is safe. Meanwhile, in the Empire, the people are gripped with fear over the sudden disappearance of their protective wall. The 7 heroes reassure them, claiming that everything will be fine as long as they are there to protect them. However, in truth, the heroes are just as terrified as the citizens. They have no idea what's coming, but they are certain it spells trouble for them. Watch this next video on screen and subscribe to not miss next part.